Today, we're going to talk about how to appreciate music and also literature. And it just so happens that music and literature all follow the same 7 elements as each other. And we will actually be drawing very interesting lines between the two through the course of today's class. So without further ado, let's begin with music, the tools of appreciation. So you've probably seen this slide before when it came to visual arts. We begin always by gathering the basic information. But rather than gathering things like medium or dimensions, in the case of paintings and sculptures, here for music, the basic information includes the title, the composer, which is the person who wrote the piece, the year published, the genre, the performing forces. So genre, usually the piece will tell you what genre it is. It could be a song, that's a genre. It could be a sonata, that's another genre. It could be a piano trio, that's another genre. Genre is kind of like, in literature, you have a poem, or you could have a play, or you could have a novel. Those are all different types of genres, different forms of music in this case. We also have performing forces. What are performing forces? Does anyone know? Performing forces are the instruments or people used in this piece. So, for example, if we have a Taylor Swift song from her earlier stage, it would be a solo female singer with guitar. That would be those would be the performing forces. Later on, maybe she would have a whole band behind her. So a band plus backup singers plus maybe drums, and then the female singer. That would be the performing forces. The tempo is the speed at which the piece is performed. So it could be slow or fast or moderate, any adjective to describe speed. And then the performer is literally who is performing. And finally, the year of performance. So when was this performed? And also when was this composed? Sometimes it's a similar date, sometimes it's centuries apart. It's always very important to know those 2 dates. The reason being that in the case of music, we're actually second-degree creators as performers. So the first creator was actually the composer. And then as the interpreter, as the person performing it, you're having your second level of interpretation and creation added on top of the first degree. Anyways, all of that is for basic information. And then we will observe carefully with the 7 elements of music and also talk about the techniques used and the historical background of these pieces. And then finally, we'll forget about 1 and 2. We remember it in our subconscious, but we'll forget about it in our minds so that we can be free to feel the actual emotions imparted by the piece. Today, we're going to go and begin with number 1, gathering the basic information. So here I have a little song from West Side Story. We can listen to it later if we have time. But this is One Hand, One Heart from West Side Story, and it's a beautiful duet. Actually, let's have a listen to it because no description will do it justice.
I am toast. Computer.
I am take VM tone.
Porridge. Purpura.
In sickness and in health.
To love and to honor.
To hold and to keep.
From each side to each room.
From tomorrow to tomorrow.
From now to forever. If it's rain, ID red. Death will
All right, so let's continue on, having had a little taste of this beautiful, beautiful song. Let me back up in here. Okay, so the title is obviously One Hand, One Heart, and we can see that if we were to look at the score, it would be written on the top of the score. And the composer can be found in the front of the music. We can see that it is composed by Leonard Bernstein over here, and the lyrics are by Stephen Sondheim. The year that it was published, usually you can find that on the first page of a piece or on the very top of a piece, but usually it could be written somewhere around here. Anyways, you'll have to search, but in this case, it was written in 1957. And the genre is a duet. So a duet is a song for two people. If you know the word duo, D-U-O, duo is for two people. So a duet is a song for two people. And in this case, we heard a male voice and a female voice, and also an instrumental accompaniment with an orchestra, right? And then finally, with the tempo, it was andante con moto, which is an Italian fancy term for saying a moderate walking speed, but with motion. And yes, here's the score, and we can see the title, One Hand, One Heart, and we can see andante con moto at the top. And we can see also that the people who are singing are called Tony and Maria. Their characters are called Tony and Maria. All right, so that's the basic information, very easy to handle. Let's go on to number 2, and this is where we will focus our talk today. So the first element of music is rhythm. This might surprise you, because some of you might think that the first element of music is melody. When you think of a song, you sing the song, you're singing the notes of it, right? The notes must be the most important thing, but actually rhythm is the most important. For example, without giving you any notes, well, first, let me make a rhythm for you. What is this piece? Da, 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 da. Yes, Beethoven. You don't need the notes. But if I were to give you E flat and C, you wouldn't know which piece it would be, necessarily. But if I gave you the rhythm, actually the rhythm is what tells us what the piece is. The rhythm is the most important part of music. And one of these reasons is because rhythm is much deeper than notes. Rhythm is in our heartbeat. When we were all still in our mother's tummies, when we were inside our mothers, we listened to her heartbeat. And we created our own heartbeat with our hearts that were growing. And da-dum, ba-dum, da-dum. We heard that for 9 to 10 months until we came into this world. So actually, rhythm is the most important thing. And even when you were a fetus inside your mother, you knew when your mother was upset or anxious. Her heartbeat would go faster and usually wouldn't feel so good, and you start kicking. But if your mother were calm, maybe her heartbeat would be slower, and you felt quite comfortable. You enjoyed that rhythm. And so we react as human beings, as mammals, to rhythm much more readily so than to melody. And so that's why rhythm is the most important part of everything. And rhythm is also part of movement. Every movement, when we walk, there is a rhythm. When we talk, there is a rhythm. There are all kinds of rhythms in daily life. The way we swing our arms is a rhythm. All kinds of things are rhythms. So within rhythm, there are two keywords that you need to know. First of all, you need to know the word beat. The beat is the basic unit of rhythm, kind of like the heartbeat of music. So, da 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 da. What I'm tapping is the beat. So this doesn't change, but the notes do change, and the lengths of the notes change, right? So the lengths of those notes that I just sang of Twinkle Twinkle are is the actual rhythm, and the speed at which the speed at which I did it is the tempo. All right, let's continue on. So here we have Happy Birthday to You. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. So you can say 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. Right. So there's a very steady, what do we call this? Beat happening, and on top of that beat, we are singing a rhythm. Now, would you call the tempo, so the speed, would you call the tempo fast, medium, or slow in this case?
Slow.
Happy verse. That would be slow. Probably moderate, in the middle somewhere, right? Okay, so how to measure what is slow, what is medium, what is fast? Maybe compare it to speaking. So happy birthday to you. That's a normal speed, right, for talking. So that's medium. If it's happy, then that is slow because it's slower than my speech. Yeah, that's a good measurer. And here I have another example. Twinkle, twinkle. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. So here we have 1, 2, 1, 2. That's the beat underneath, and we're singing the rhythm. Great. So now let's talk about the second element, the one that we're all familiar with, melody. Melody actually is a set of notes that carry the song, if you will, the tune of the music. So it's the horizontal line created. You can see here. Da, 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 da. So there's a going up and coming down and going up and coming down. There's a wave, right? Even if you don't read music, you can see these notes going up and down, right? So in this class, you don't need to read music, but you can see that it goes up and down. Okay, so we call this up and down motion the contour of the melody. The contour lines, remember in art, we had contour lines, the shape. This is my contouring line of my shoulder, right? So in music, we also have contour lines. And we can say that this contour line is wave-like because it behaves like a wave. Later, we'll see some other types of contours to compare. For example, let's just fast forward to another example. Here, joy to the world, the Lord is come. So here, the notes all go down and then they go up. So the contour here is not wave-like because it's more descending, going down, right? So the contours can be different. Now let's go back so that we can talk about some other things. So we talked about contour. Now range. Range is the space between the lowest note and the highest note. So you literally count. So you find the lowest note, which is literally lowest. So this is the lowest note. You don't need to know that it's a D, and you count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the highest note. So it's 5-note span. It's a 5-note span. If you count the space, the line, the space, the line, the space. And when we count the note itself. So that is 1. That's not 0, that's 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? From the lowest to the highest. So it's a 5-note span range, which is considered narrow because almost anyone can sing it. That's usually narrow. If we're talking about a wide span, it's usually a span that has a leap that would be a little difficult for your throat to handle, unless you warmed up or if you were a professional. And going on, talking about leaps. So in this piece, do we have any leaps? Again, you don't need to read music. You just need to see if these notes are going closely together or there's a big space in drop or going up between the notes. In this case, there are no jumps, actually. So the motion is conjunct, which means moving in relatively small intervals. Interval is the distance between two notes. And disjunct is the opposite, when there are relatively larger leaps. Again, we will practice this in some examples in a second. Lastly, we would like to talk about the climax, which is really important in storytelling and also in music. It's the high point. It's the part where all of the energy goes to and after which the energy falls. When we're talking about painting, we have a similar thing to climax, which is the focal point, right? This is where the point at which all of our eyes go towards. That is the point of this piece. So in music, the point of the piece is the climax. In this piece, there isn't much of a climax. We're not quite sure where there is a note that sticks out. But perhaps we can look at this one. So in this piece, Joy to the World, we can see how the first part of it is moving in conjunct motion, so very closely spaced together. It's moving by stepwise motion. Do you see? There are no leaps. But right here, between come and let, it goes from a D to an A, a very wide space, even if you don't read, and you can call that a big leap. So over here, we call this disjunct motion. And even if you don't read music, you can just draw these dots on your scrap paper or something, and you can see the line. And here the line is bigger. It's like a graph. It's like reading a graph, a line graph. Okay, here's a little example. Again, without reading the notes, what would you say about the motion? Is it conjunct or disjunct? Conjunct is closely spaced, and disjunct is marked by leaps. Who would like to say disjunct? You want to say disjunct? Why is it disjunct? Yes, there's a quite large space. So this note, how many notes is it from this note to this note? 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 4 notes wide. And then 3 notes wide, 3 notes down, 3 notes, 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 8 notes, 4 notes, 4 notes, 4 notes, 3 notes. So it's never one note away. It's you can't, you have to exaggerate it a little bit, right? Like one note to one note away, one interval of one note is good. It's like conjunct, very stepwise. But even if it's 3 notes, that's already like this. And if it's 8 notes, it's like going all the way there. You have to, I know it looks small on the board, but it is already a very large leap if you compare it to 1. Okay, the next element of music is harmony, and that's how the notes sound vertically. So melody is how the notes sound horizontally. It's the notes up here, right, going this way. But we also have harmonies in the form of chords, usually either written or implied, to tell us of the harmony. Now, I have a virtual keyboard on the laptop, but it wouldn't connect. So originally you could see the keyboard on the projector, but you can't. So you will listen to it. Now, I will play what's written on the top first. Let me make this really loud. 1 second. Okay, so that's Yankee Doodle. That's Yankee Doodle, right? Yankee Doodle went to town. So that, do you hear the piano? All right, so the harmony that's written underneath is a set of chords that go well with the melody. It sounds good with it. Let's give it a play. Right? So are the notes of the harmony, and they're sounding at the same time, vertically. That's what I mean by vertically. They're happening at the same time, like a column of sound. as opposed to a snake going through time. So the melody is, and the harmony is implied in that chord, that C major chord. Now, this chord can have certain notes that go well with it and certain notes that don't go well with it. So let's have some vocabulary to describe it. Well, first of all, let's see if this sounds good together. This note. Does it sound nice? Yes, it sounds harmonious together because these notes are the same as the ones found in the chord. So the chord has this note and it's the same note, right? It's the same note, you can hear it, but an octave higher. So 2 octaves higher, I should say. So that is consonant, as you can see here, consonant to the harmony. So it has a stable and restful sound. It feels very nice, very relaxing. You don't have to go anywhere. You can stay there for the whole day and it sounds great. However, do you hear this note? Does that sound comfortable or stable to you? Normally not. That's a good answer. In some musics, it's actually good. For example, in some jazz or in some more modern music where we establish a set of rules that say, hey, that's okay. But normally, that's nice, but that wants to resolve. Do you feel that? So yes, this note that sounds weird, that sounds uncomfortable, it sounds bad because it's not part of the chord. The chord is, and this note is not part of it. And if you actually, there's a physics reason to explain this, a scientific reason. It's not just, woo, art. There's a scientific reason. It's because their overtones interfere with one another. So all these notes, if you graph their sound waves on a spectrogram, you can see where the overtones are sounding in a note. And when you have a note that is dissonant or not sounding good with one another in the traditional sense, then the overtones tend to clash with one another. And if you look at those sound waves, usually they're very jagged and irregular looking. So they look uncomfortable. It's like sitting on a nail. Right? So that's not comfortable. But if you graph on a spectrogram consonant notes, for example, this note fits perfectly with that note and also with overtones in these other 2 notes. So the sound waves that occur when we mix all these notes are actually rounder. There are not as many jagged notes. And in science, actually, in physics, we define a noise as a series of sound waves that are irregular in pattern. So that is noise because all those sounds are irregular. You cannot predict it, and therefore it makes you feel uncomfortable. And this traces all the back to physiology. Like, this is not because of culture. This is due to the universal DNA of creatures who exist on this earth, right? Like, even if you play this sound to your cat or to a chicken or something, they will still feel uncomfortable with it. So that's the difference between consonants, a note that sounds great together, 2 notes or more that sound great together and are stable and restful, versus a dissonance, which sounds unstable, discordant, or uncomfortable. Now, when a dissonance, that's the noun, when a dissonance turns into a consonance, we have a resolution. So that's when it goes, I can lie in bed now after a hard day of stress. I can resolve the dissonance into a consonance. And so, these are all some helpful terms that you can use. Chord, well, this is the chord underneath. The chord tone is the note or are the notes that belong to that chord. Non-chord tone, those are notes that don't belong to that chord, such as that dissonant note, and dissonance and consonance are the results of, respectively, chord tones and non-chord tones. And when you resolve a dissonance into a consonance, that action is called a resolution. The next element is quite easy. We've gone with the hard ones. It's called form. And form could be anything. It's basically the rhyming scheme of music. So you know in a poem, sometimes there's a form, right? Like the first line rhymes with the second line, and then the third line rhymes with the fourth line. You know what I mean? Like the first two lines rhyme, right? They rhyme together. They have the same sound ending with one, the same last syllable that rhymes with one another. Well, in music, we can have that happening as well. And form tells us what the roadmap of the piece is like. For example, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star has an ABBA form. We can sing it together and you will notice how the form is like this. So there's twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. And then here's the B. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Right? That's repeated. And then the same thing as what was the beginning. So twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, whatever words there are. So you can see how this is the same, and then these are also the same with one another. So that is the form of Twinkle Twinkle. And the interesting thing is that there are many pieces that also have this form, as we'll discover. And so if you listen to a short enough piece, such as a little song like Twinkle Twinkle, you can usually determine the form. Now there could be larger forms. The music students here might have heard of things like rondo or sonata form or double exposition. Like these are all forms that either the composer has invented or are already pre-existing that the composer is adopting as a model for his composition or her composition. Whoops. The fifth element is timbre. It looks like timber, but it's pronounced timbre. And let's have a listen to some of the different timbres of the same note, if this will play. So this graph over here is a spectrogram, and you can see the overtones. That's the fundamental. And then these are the overtones. And you can see we're always playing the same note, but the overtones are different. You see with the piano, the overtones are like this. But the nylon guitar, for example, is missing these overtones here. And the sitar has way more overtones over here. So based on the different types of overtones and what percentage we have of each, we can hear that even though they are playing the same notes, they actually sound a lot different. They sound like different voices, right? And actually everybody sitting in this room, every person has their own timbre. And you can even change your timbre based on the way that you produce a sound. You can produce it using a very, like you could say the same note in different ways, right? You could go dee, like very concentrated, or you could go ah, like very breathy. And even though it's the same note, you can produce it using different timbres. Now, what are some uses of timbres? Why do we have so many timbres? Because different timbres have different emotional and expressive purposes, as we will discover. And it makes the piece more colorful. Number 6, we have texture. So the texture is usually three things. It's either monophonic, homophonic, or polyphonic. Mono, so we have mono, which means what? Single, one, right? And so monophony is when there's just a single melody by itself. For example, Whoops. Okay, so those men singing the Gregorian chant, that was monophony. We can also have homophony. That's when we have a very clear melody accompanied by another person or another very clearly different texture that is producing the harmony. Whoops. It's hidden in here somewhere. I have to click on it just so. Whoa, okay. It's not working. But did you hear a bit of it? There's like this piano sound. Let me see. Well, anyways, it's, for example, in the case of a Taylor Swift song. So she's accompanying herself on the guitar, playing the guitar, and then she's singing a song. So she's singing the melody, and then her guitar is providing the chords, the harmonies. It's the accompaniment. If you karaoke is basically homophony without the melody, right? So usually you know that it's homophony because if you take away the melody, whatever remains doesn't really sound complete without the melody. So that's homophony. And finally, polyphony. Poly means many. So polyphony is when we have multiple melodies all happening at the same time. So, for example, a round is an example of polyphony. That's when, for example, one group of people sing something and then another group sing the same thing but out of sync with one another. So you guys are independent. But when you are put together, it still sounds good. So if you remember in the Pendulum of Styles lecture, we were listening to some Bach, some Crucifixus, and then also to the Renaissance piece, Virgo Serena by Josquin des Prez. Those are all examples of polyphony, when we have multiple lines all happening at the same time and they each make sense on their own accord. So I like to actually draw these things maybe in a visual way. So monophony is like one line. Homophony is like one line, but then there is another accompaniment, and it's not as important, like this. Okay, and then finally we have polyphony. That's when we have one line. We have another line, crisscross. It can come in and out. And then we can have a third line or fourth line or even fifth, sixth, seventh, as many as you want. Let's see, like this, like that. Okay, so that is polyphony because each of these lines are very interesting and unique in their own way, but somehow when put together, they still make sense. They still sound interesting and logical and wonderful. Last, we have the final element of music, which is dynamics, how loud or soft the music is. What is the dynamics here? I often ask my piano students. They say, what? What is dynamics? So these are dynamics. You can have pianissimo, piano, mezzo forte. Oh, sorry, mezzo piano. Mezzo forte, forte, fortissimo, and those are the respective volumes, relative volumes of these different Italian terms. Now you might notice that they all are based on these roots: piano, the P, and forte, the F. And everything else is just a variation of it. So if you look at this blob over here, it's piano. Piano means soft. And then if you have very soft, it's pianissimo, because issimo in Italian means very. So very soft. Mezzo means medium. So when you say medium soft, it's mezzo piano, because that's soft. If we look at this blob over here, same idea. So we have forte, which means strong, or in this case loud, but it actually means strong. And if you have fortissimo, issimo means very, so very strong. And you can have mezzo forte, which is medium strong. And therefore, when you put them all together, you have this set of stuff. And you can see that in music, it's usually printed inside the music in this format down here because it's more space saving. But this is how you write it and pronounce it. Okay. So now let's practice appreciating some music by listening to the song that we were listening to earlier, and then we take it apart using these elements. So let's put it all together. Let me actually show you, 1 second. Let me show you the video of this because it's actually really beautiful. Oops. All right, so this was what I was watching. So we will look at this piece as part of our first lesson after we have learned all the basics. So you're getting a little preview. We'll revisit this piece later on. This is from West Side Story, and the two protagonists here are Maria and Tony. They're like Juliet and Romeo in Shakespeare. So the girl and boy fall in love, but their families are enemies, and so they can't be together. And so therefore, they try to be together secretly, and it doesn't go well. Right now in this scene, they haven't told their families yet, but they really want to be together. So they marry each other in a very cute and very preciously beautiful scene. So let's watch it first.
Sorry, Bowers. Move the toe.
Now you see, Anita, there was nothing to worry about.
Look, Mama's crying. I am with them. Thank you, Maria.
I got here. Take the tones
Correction. Kokora.
in sickness and in health,
To love and to honor.
to hold and to keep.
From each sun to each moon.
From tomato to tomato.
From now to bright.
The edge was high.
With this rain, I knew that
With this rain, I will.
All right, so let's put this now into, whoops. Let's put this into our model of analyzing. So what do you think of the rhythm? The first element. What do you think of the rhythm? Is it slow, medium, or fast? Slow, very good. And how does slow make you feel? Relaxed, okay. And what other words come to mind? Calm, touched. Yes, it gives you time to feel touched. Usually if it's too fast, you don't have time to feel touched. And it feels holy, like a prayer. When you're praying to God, you don't usually pray very fast, hopefully. So there's something holy and spiritual about it because of the slow rhythm that is also very steady. Okay, so that's rhythm, slow tempo, and very steady beats, right? Now, what about the melody? Let's listen to the melody a little bit to get a refresher.
I am honor. Enough.
Listen to the melodies that they sing. So is it going up or down? Up. It's going up. Not straight up, but in these little, yes, in these little hill shapes. Good. And it's, well, what does that make you feel? What do you feel he's expressing by making these little hill shapes in his melody? Hopeful, yes. It's full of hope, and he's not, promising like, oh, marry me, you'll get rich, I'll buy you a big car. No, it's not like that. He is very sincere, and he's telling her the hope that he has for their future. And, I will try my best, basically, right? So there's these little small humps of hope. There's also, so when we go up, there's a little leap, but the rest of it is actually quite conjunct, right? It's quite stepwise. Okay, let's listen to some more of it, see if it changes. So only death will part us now goes down because, well, death is rather sad and usually go down when you die. So that's a very good example of word painting. Word painting is when we have something in the music. It could be the singing, but it could be anything to do with the music. It could be the instruments. And word painting is when the words are painted by the music. So, for example, the word death has been painted by the downward contour of the melody. Now, this is the same thing. So what do you think of them imitating one another? Are they on the same page as a couple? Do they understand each other as a couple? Yes, yes. Yeah, it's not like he's saying one thing and she's like, oh no, I'm thinking about my makeup, right? Is my hair beautiful enough today? No, she's singing the exact same thing as him. So they're together, they're thinking about the same thing. I think they make a good couple based on the melodies they're singing. And in fact, you'll hear that they sing the same melody together in a moment. So now they're singing together. They're singing the same rhythm, but slightly different notes that are consonant or dissonant. consonant. Excellent. So consonant, to remind us, is when the notes sound good together, when they sound harmonious together. And I would say that his harmonizing with her melody sounds extremely harmonious. Now, is this texture that they're singing, the two voices, polyphony, monophony, or homophony? Polyphony, very good, because both lines are important. You can listen to one line only and it still sounds great. Now, if we took their voices out and only listened to the instrumental part, that's the homophonic part, right? It wouldn't sound complete. But in this case, his melody sounds really beautiful by itself, and her melody also sounds great by itself. So it's polyphony happening right now. And the polyphony is like giving each other a hug, right? Which is what they're doing in the scene. So they were together, but then when they sing, even death won't part us, notice how the voices deviate. They're singing slightly out of sync. Yeah, before they were singing the rhythms exactly together. They were really locked together. But death will take them apart, as we know in this story. Everyone knows Romeo and Juliet, right? They don't end together. They die. One of them dies, and then the other one gets sad and kills themselves. So in this case, we already know that they're not going to end up together as well. We don't know how in this story, how exactly that happens, but we know they won't be together. And so this is a case of foreshadowing, which is a literary term we'll talk about in the second part of our lecture. Da, da, da. That theme. That one has a what interval, music students? A what? What interval? Let's listen to it. Listen to the interruption and tell me what interval are the first two notes. So what was that interval? The tritone. Yes, and the tritone is the most dissonant interval known to man. Now my computer is updating itself, so I cannot play it on my virtual keyboard just now. But a tritone, you don't need to know this is just for fun, but a tritone is an interval that is an augmented fourth or diminished fifth. It's just what you just heard, and it sounds extremely yearning, extremely dissonant and uncomfortable. There's something wrong that's happening. It needs to resolve. So that is a tritone. And the reason why it's called a tritone is because it divides the octave into three sections exactly. So if you have an octave, for example, C to C, the tritone would be at the F sharp. It's dividing the octave exactly in half. If you didn't understand any of that, it's okay. But just know that this interval we heard is a tritone, and it's very dissonant, and it's foreshadowing something bad is just around the corner. All right. So let's continue on then with our various tools. What have we left? We had melody, harmony, form. So we would have to listen to it again to really determine the form, but I think there's an ABA form from what I'm listening to, although I might be wrong. So something they were saying earlier together, and then, well, A, the girl repeats it, and then they have a B, and then they return to the A. But I'm not quite sure. I'll have to listen to it again. The timbre, well, consists of, would you say, harsh tones or very round colors? Round. And a lot of, especially the girl's voice is very round, but also the instruments used. So we have a lot of stringed instruments. Those are very round usually. Examples of a harsher sound is maybe like a little trumpet, or maybe a drum of some kind, or even a harp when it's played very plucked. So those are maybe a little brighter timbres, but overall here we have very round and what is another word? Tom sounding timbre. And then finally the texture we talked about, oh yes, dynamics. So how would you describe the dynamics of what we just heard? Yes, it's quite soft piano. A lot of it is piano. Maybe sometimes it gets more excited, more intense, but a lot of it is piano because it is once again a prayer, right, between these two. It's not a declaration of love that is meant for a hall of 3,000 people to listen to. It is their own precious secret for one another. So therefore, the dynamic is piano. So all in all, you see how we can use these different elements of music, these 7 elements of music, to really understand what the composer is saying, to be able to appreciate more than just, that sounds so nice, let's hear it again. All of these choices, especially in the case of a good composer, are intentional, and they are there to help serve the music so that it can express the emotions intended by the composer, intended by the words, even more so. I'll end today's first part of the talk with something about music and also about literature and maybe even art, which is that, art tells the truth. A lot of science people, I used to be really into science too. A lot of science people say, you art people, like it's all make-believe. It's all fake stuff. We science people, we're doing the calculations. We're so, down to the decimal points. We're measuring our experiments. We're all about the reality. Oh, you art people, you're just imagining some story about some lovers. Like, that's so fake. But actually, love tells the truth, even more so than reality. And the reason we say that is because when we go through our lives, there are actually certain truths that are right below the surface of what happens to you. You might have a love story like that one, or you might have a story about going to college and you meet a terrible teacher, and then you stand up for yourself, and you have a big fight with that teacher, and then you win, for example. Okay, so that is the core of the story. You're smiling because that story sounds kind of interesting and funny. And within that, maybe if you listened to the story more carefully, it gives us courage. It gives us courage to do what's right, even if it's hard, for example. It gives us courage to persevere in something, even though we're the little guy, right? And these are the truths. Now, in your real life, even if you had such an experience, it would be littered with other peripheral information. I wake up, I brush my teeth. I notice a pimple. I brush my hair. I put on my clothes. All of these other details that are interdispersed in your life that actually have nothing to do with the story. But because you're living it, you also encounter those peripheral details. art deletes those details. When we watch a movie, they usually don't brush their teeth, comb their hair, and then go on with their day. It's like they wake up and they're ready to go, right? Because those aspects, which I just mentioned, are the peripheral details that distract us from the truth, the central truth, which is about courage and perseverance, or any other lessons we might learn about justice, about what is fair. All of those things are the real stories. All of those are the seeds of truth that we spend all our lives learning about. And art is the way to expose them in a very clear way. And so when we encounter art ourselves, when we consume art, it is a way for us to see that truth directly, and usually in a way that we might not have seen ourselves before, but that artist, through their inspired state, through their perhaps genius or just luck of their lives, was able to see. And now through their art, you are able to see as well. And you can bring that truth into your life so that you can live your own story in a way that is close to being alive and being truthful and being real. So that is the true purpose of art, and that's why art, and especially music, even though it's all notes, it's all make-believe, it's all pretend, it's actually about truth. And now that you know all these ways of analyzing music, you can further appreciate and understand what truth the music is trying to tell. So let's have a break until 2:15, and then we'll come back for part 2.